It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Now, our featured story tonight, we're already like an hour and a half into the show, but we're gonna spend some time on this. It'll be a later show. Our featured story, we're talking all about the acquisition of TikTok by a consortium of U.S. companies. And for those that don't know, this has been a very long-term conversation. And let's talk briefly about the background. TikTok, the reason that it is the subject of so much scrutiny and so much attention from policymakers, there's one simple reason, and that is that it is a damn good platform. That's the only reason why. TikTok, at its apogee around 2019, 2020, was at one point the fastest growing social platform in history. The fastest to reach 1 billion users, growing and far surpassing the growth rate of Instagram and every other US-owned social platform. So the reason it's under scrutiny is because it is the best product. The TikTok algorithm, but also I believe the freedom on TikTok is why it was so successful. It was simply better. It is better than Instagram. It is better than YouTube. It is better than Snapchat, all US-owned social platforms. And that is why it exploded in growth. Now, the secret sauce of TikTok, everybody knows, is its algorithm. And when we say the algorithm, what do we mean? We mean its ability using software to connect users with interesting and funny content that they want to see. And there's some factors that make the algorithm effective. It rewards first-time content creators. So if you make a channel on TikTok and you post your first TikTok, there is a much higher likelihood as a new creator or a first-time creator that your video will be shown to a larger audience than any other platform. Every other platform like Instagram, like YouTube, who does it reward? It rewards channels with huge subscriber bases. Obviously. Who gets the most views? Who gets the most traction? Who gets rewarded? It is the channels with millions of followers on Instagram and on YouTube. So there's this huge bias, and the platforms have a relationship with those big creators. The platforms help those larger creators get access to the user base, and those larger creators, they stay generating on a full-time basis high production quality, high value content for the platform that keeps users engaged. And that was the mindset of these platforms. That was kind of the unspoken relationship between the biggest creators and the platforms. And there was, up until TikTok came around, kind of this unknown bias, this unknown quid pro quo going on, if you could call it that. But TikTok turned that upside down and put it on its head. What TikTok does instead is if you make a video, you get a much higher chance, whether you have followers or not, that that video will go on a stranger's timeline. So I could have 0 followers. If I make a TikTok, it'll be shown to 12 people. And if they engage with it, it'll be shown to more people, and so on. And what this does on TikTok is it incentivizes people to make content. There's more creators as opposed to passive consumers because there's an incentive. It's easier. And it makes it more competitive then by definition. So those bigger creators, they're competing with small creators too for market share, for space on that For You page. And what this does is it makes the platform more dynamic. If it's more competitive, if there's more creators as opposed to passive users, maybe there's a higher ratio, then you're gonna get a higher chance that someone is going to pop off for being funny, for being creative, for being good looking, whatever. And their algorithm is designed, maybe more so than any other platform, to simply deliver the best content, no matter who it comes from, to the user, and tailoring that content to that user. So this is why TikTok ultimately is receiving so much scrutiny, because it is simply better. But there's another reason. There's a couple of reasons. The other problem with TikTok is that, and I think people maybe have noticed this, although I'm not sure how many people have noticed this. At a time when censorship in America was so pervasive, after Trump's election in 2016, in 2017, 2018, 2019, the censorship noose was constantly tightening. There were waves of purges on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. And the type of censorship was always progressing. It started with violent content like ISIS and mass shooters. Then it turned into hate speech. Then it turned into strict editorial ideological censorship. They said, if you're a white nationalist, if you're a sexist, if you're a racist, if you don't believe that the election was free and fair in 2020, then you lose your account. At a time when the American social platforms were becoming more censorious, TikTok had breakout creators like Andrew Tate, maybe most famously. People could actually be edgy on the platform. And this is sort of a foregone conclusion here, but Andrew Tate blew up on TikTok in 2019. Think about that. When Gavin McInnes, when Sam Hyde, when Richard Spencer, when TRS for that matter, when Nick Fuentes, when all the edgy content was banned in America and went underground, Andrew Tate was the most Googled man in the world. How? How did that happen? It happened quickly, rapidly. It happened on TikTok in the span of 2 months. And look at everything that's happened since. The lawfare against him, the propaganda, like this series on Netflix that just won a bunch of Emmys, vilifying creators like Andrew Tate. There was the rapid growth of creators like him, and that was enabled because TikTok is not headquartered in America. And as such, it is not subject to the same advocacy group pressure. And this tells you something a little bit about how censorship works. Think about it. Why is it? Because maybe this is a foregone conclusion, but think about how this works. Why? Why were YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter censoring when TikTok was not? Did they not get the memo? Why were all the American social platforms cracking down in unison progressively, but TikTok seemed to be, for a time, very free and very open and very fair? Or more so. The discrepancy is that TikTok was headquartered in China, and all those other platforms are in America. And you might not know the difference. Maybe you didn't even know that at that time. But the difference is that in America, all these social platforms rely on what? How do they monetize? How do they make money? Do you know? How does Facebook make money? How does Snapchat make money? How does Instagram, YouTube make money? 95% of Facebook's revenue comes from advertisements. Same with YouTube, same with Snapchat. To the extent they can monetize, it's advertisers. And who controls the advertisers in America? We know. When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, how did advocacy groups in America try to push back on some of the content that began to proliferate because of the liberalization of speech on the platform? They went after the advertisers. When Mark Zuckerberg in 2020 refused to take down a post from the president, Donald Trump, about BLM, how did advocacy groups push back? They organized an advertiser boycott. And who organized those boycotts? The ADL. The ADL organized advertiser boycotts. They threatened to make American social platforms not profitable, or in the event that they're not profitable to begin with, they threatened to destroy the revenue base by organizing the advertisers, the source of all the revenue, and getting them to stop based on political reasons. They couldn't do that with TikTok because TikTok wasn't running that same kind of model. TikTok was running a different model. They had their creators selling products from China. They had their creators selling items from the TikTok shop. They had other advertisers, you don't see an advertisement for Ford and Chevy and Monsanto or, Slavery Incorporated. You don't see ads like that on TikTok. Although increasingly you do in the past few years. Initially, they didn't monetize as much. They had other revenue, and then a lot of their revenue came from the shop. But it's also the stakeholders. Who owns the American platforms here? Who has the largest stake or share in Alphabet, in Meta, in these other companies? It is the major asset managers like Vanguard, like BlackRock. These are companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And they have to apply by all the political rules that all the other publicly traded companies do. Not the case with ByteDance in China. So you think, why was TikTok so effective? Why was it such a good product? Well, there's technological reasons, but there's also political reasons too. Now, of course, TikTok being headquartered in China is another reason. It's not just the size of it, but also it being headquartered in China, which is why there was scrutiny from American policymakers. They said that because TikTok is headquartered in China, that Beijing would have access to all the American user data. And that is a legitimate national security problem because these applications, they do take a lot of your data. They take your device data, they take data from your camera and from your microphone, they take it from other applications, geolocation. It is a legitimate problem. And to the extent that we have an American intelligence community, that is one of their legitimate interests, is protecting American data from foreign countries. And so this was an issue that was flagged around 2019 and 2020. It was 5 years ago that this originally became a subject of debate in Washington. And the Trump administration, the first one, banned TikTok on government devices. And they attempted to broker a deal to get TikTok sold to an American company. Ultimately, that never happened. And what they settled on was to transfer American user data to an American company called Oracle. And so the ownership of TikTok would not be transferred from China to America, but American user data would be transferred from Chinese data centers to American-owned data centers owned by Oracle, one of our Silicon Valley companies owned by Larry Ellison. Now, for 4 years, they tabled that issue. That was shelved. A lot of people don't know that. Some people remember, but that original push to ban TikTok happened 5 years ago. And a lot of people forget that it was resolved. Many people don't even know that it was resolved. All those cybersecurity concerns, that happened half a decade ago, and they reached a resolution. Many people don't even know that Oracle hosts American user data in American-owned data centers. That cybersecurity thing is basically a moot point. When did banning TikTok all of a sudden became an issue again? Last year. When last year? Shortly after October 7th in Israel. After the October 7th attacks in the end of 2023, 2 years ago, everybody was obviously talking about it on social media. Everybody rushed to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube to give their take on the October 7th attack and then the ensuing Israeli counteroffensive, which did not begin really until November. Israel started the blockade right away. The airstrikes came later. The invasion came around the beginning of November of 2023. By the end of November, they reached a 1 to 2 week ceasefire, and then it began all over again in December. And it was roughly around December 2023. Pay attention to the timeline. It was roughly around December 2023 that we started to get analytics about how people were talking about the war in Gaza. And the trend, the analytics could not be more striking. On every American platform, the pro-Israel content was by far and away more popular, more frequent, the hashtags more used than all of the pro-Palestine content. If you looked at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it was like 90-10 in terms of pro-Israel hashtags, pro-Israel sentiment as measured by AI versus pro-Palestine sentiment. It wasn't even close. But on TikTok, that trend was inverted. It was completely reversed. On TikTok, the pro-Palestine hashtags, content, sentiment, dominated the For You page, dominated the platform. By December 2023, the ADL and all the other Jewish groups started to raise awareness about this. They compiled the data, they published the data, and they started to raise the alarm and say that this is an anti-Semitism problem. They said that the American social platforms, which are moderated by ADL-approved moderators, have ADL-suggested enforcement policies, are under the political control of the ADL. They all have pro-Israel content, defending Israel, supporting the offensive. They said, but Chinese-owned TikTok, that is not subject to the same pressures. They said that has become a breeding ground for vile anti-Semitism expressed as pro-Palestine sentiment. And so during the Republican primary debates in 2023 and 2024, Nikki Haley, backed by Miriam Ellison, said, she even quoted one of these reports. She said it was an issue of the presidential election that if you spend time on TikTok, you are becoming more anti-Semitic. And all of the 50-plus Jewish organizations in America began to lobby that the United States government ban TikTok. They said TikTok is allowing anti-Semitism to swell. That is why the government must take over or ban TikTok. And wouldn't you know, once again, what is that timeline? In January 2024, you get a bill in Congress to ban TikTok. By April, it passes. By April 2024, it passes a divided government, a Republican House, a Democrat Senate. They couldn't fund the government in 2024. They couldn't fund a border wall. They couldn't fund even the foreign aid up to that point. But they banned TikTok. And do you know which groups took a victory lap after they banned TikTok? The North American Jewish Federation. The North American Jewish Federation, which speaks on behalf of and works in coordination with over 50 North American Jewish organizations. Why? They could not be more explicit in their letter. They said because of anti-Semitism on the platform. Now, nominally, the U.S. government and the Republicans and the Democrats and Fox News said it was about cybersecurity concerns. They said it was about China. That was a lie. It was never about China. If it was, we resolved that 5 years ago. It might have been about China at one point in time. Maybe there was an argument to be made in 2019 or 2020 that this was a Trojan horse for China to take American user data and propagandize young Americans. Maybe you had an argument at one point. You don't have that argument after the data was transferred to American data centers. October 7th happens, Israel invades, they take the analytics, and immediately you get a bill in Congress and they ban it. And it is widely believed that it was under pressure from Jewish advocacy organizations that they voted to ban TikTok. And the deadline was that if TikTok was not sold to an American company by January 2025, this year, that TikTok would be banned. Now the rest is history. You might recall that in January, TikTok was banned for a couple of days, just before the Trump administration came to power. And the incoming Trump administration brokered a deal before the inauguration to keep TikTok on. They gave TikTok an extension on that deadline to facilitate a deal. Now, here's the news story. The news is that the United States, in its trade negotiations with China about tariffs and about rare earths and on technology and chips and wafers, in their broader trade negotiations, the Trump administration is facilitating that sale of TikTok to an American company. We have a rough framework of what that deal will look like. And what that deal looks like is that American companies will take an 80% stake in TikTok. It will be managed by a board. One of the board members will be appointed by the U.S. government. This is a story. It says, quote, a proposal to save TikTok from going dark in the United States would involve investments from a number of U.S.-based venture capital firms, private equity funds, and tech companies. Together, the investors would create a new U.S.-based company that will operate the app domestically. The framework of the agreement mirrors the deal presented to President Trump in April. Among the investors, which are expected to own a roughly 80% stake in TikTok, with the Chinese shareholders holding the rest, they are Oracle, Andreessen Horowitz, and Silver Lake. The new consortium would be operated by a majority U.S. board, including a member appointed by the administration. The framework is still under discussion and could change before Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping are slated to speak by phone on Friday. And this is an older article, but there's no resolution here. Oracle executive chairman Larry Ellison has widely been rumored to be involved in discussions to buy TikTok's U.S. assets. His company already has a relationship with TikTok. Oracle in 2020 began hosting TikTok's U.S. data, and it briefly reached a deal with the first Trump administration to buy TikTok during that year before the deal was ultimately blocked. Now, TikTok, as we talked about, is one of the most important social platforms in the world. It is the fastest growing, or depending on how you categorize it, was the fastest growing in history. It is one of the most popular, especially with Generation Z, hugely influential. Whoever controls the social platforms wields a lot of power, as evidenced by Mark Zuckerberg's wealth and power, Elon Musk's wealth and power. He bought Twitter because that's where the power is, the social platforms. So the question is, just who will be in control of this extremely high-powered social platform? Larry Ellison. Who is Larry Ellison? Well, like Mark Zuckerberg, he is Jewish. And not only is Larry Ellison Jewish, but he is also, would you be surprised if I told you, he is also the single biggest private benefactor of the Israeli Defense Forces in history? Crazy coincidence, isn't it? He has given the biggest private contributions to the Israeli Defense Forces, totaling tens of millions of dollars on a yearly basis. And not only that, he is a close personal friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, such that at one point in time, he even offered Netanyahu a seat on the board of Oracle. So think of it. TikTok is being bought out by an American company that is owned by a Jewish billionaire, friends with Netanyahu, a company that manages all of TikTok's user data, which would have had Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, on its board. Really? It gets better. Before this even goes through, TikTok also has a new head moderator on the platform. This is an article about that. TikTok hired a proud American Jewish former IDF soldier, Erica Mindel, as its new hate speech manager. She entered the position of public policy manager for hate speech in July. That position involves spearheading long-term policy strategies regarding monitoring online content, hate speech, and advocating the company's policy stances. Her job is to serve as a subject matter expert on anti-Semitism and hate speech, analyze hate speech, and focus on anti-Semitic content. Previously, she worked as a contractor for the U.S. State Department. She worked for the special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Prior to that, she spent 2 years at the American Jewish Committee as its assistant director of program development. During an AJC video in 2023, she explained that she was raised as a traditional and conservative Jew. She spoke of how during her first month at university, a BDS motion was brought, and she dedicated herself wholeheartedly to combating BDS. She spoke of how passionate her Zionist identity was during Israel's 2014 Operation Protective Edge in the occupied territories. Very similar to their war in Gaza now. She said, "I knew the well-being of Jews worldwide and the security of Israel would be issues of a lifelong importance to me. After graduating university, she made Aliyah and joined the IDF, where she spent 2.5 years as an instructor in the Armored Corps." She said, "For many, this might seem like a contradiction, being a liberal and progressive that is also a Zionist and so committed to join the IDF." She said, "But these two identities go hand in hand. I'm a proud American Jew." The president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of North America said in March 2024 that TikTok helped fuel a horrific spike in anti-Semitism that our communities are feeling every day. It's time to take action. Now, let me get this straight. So, we're banning TikTok in America. We're banning TikTok on government devices. We force them to move U.S. user data to U.S.-owned companies. We're banning the platform in the United States unless they sell it to an American company. Ostensibly, the reason we're doing all of this, which is hugely unpopular for the young people, hurts economic productivity. Why are we doing this? Ostensibly, we're doing this because it's a national security issue to have a foreign government own such a powerful platform. It's a national security problem to have a foreign government, a foreign company, own a platform that is so influential in America and have access to all of its data. But that platform is going to be moderated and controlled by a soldier from a foreign country's military. How does that make any sense? So China can't access the data, but an IDF soldier can? Someone who left America to serve in a foreign country's military, serves on the American Jewish Committee, serves as the envoy for anti-Semitism. That person can be trusted. What are her loyalties? Beijing can't have it, but Jerusalem can. And then we'll do one better. She's just some content moderator. We're going to sell TikTok to an American company that is owned by a sponsor of a foreign country's military, Larry Ellison, who would have put the Prime Minister of Israel on that company's board. So make that make sense. The company can't be owned by China, but it can be owned by Israel. The company can't be regulated by China, but it could be regulated by Israel. So why did they ban TikTok? Is it because of cybersecurity concerns? And who banned TikTok? Under pressure from whom? And who runs our political system? And using our political system, who is running our social platforms in America? See, this is what I'm talking about. This is how American politics works. This If you want to talk about the Jewish question, which I hate that terminology, but if you want to talk about that, if you want to ask questions about Jews, this is where you start. People ask rhetorical questions. They say, what, you think 2% of the population controls America? How does that happen? Oh, you think Jews run America? How do they do that? I'll tell you how. Jonathan Greenblatt at the ADL will rally the advertisers. He'll take out a front page ad in the LA Times, a full page front page ad on the LA Times, and use the bully pulpit against the biggest publicly traded companies in America, saying, if you support Facebook or Twitter, you're anti-Semitic, and we will call you out as anti-Semitic, and we will scare your shareholders into compliance. And doing this, they choke the revenue of the social platforms. And that is how these gangster-like Jewish organizations are running something like a protection racket. Jonathan Greenblatt is running a protection racket. They're all afraid of him. The social platforms need to be in the good graces of the advertisers. The advertisers need to be in the good graces of the shareholders. And the shareholders don't like when the media, which is influenced by Greenblatt, which is owned by people like Sumner Redstone or Sherry Redstone, the media, which is owned by people sympathetic to Israel, in many cases are Jews. The shareholders and the asset managers like BlackRock, run by Larry Fink, they don't like when the ADL is calling these companies anti-Semitic. So that means the companies can't be giving ad revenue to social platforms that don't do the ADL's bidding. So the social platforms have to do the ADL's bidding. How do they get the American public on board? Well, the American public has been propagandized for years with Schindler's List created by a Jewish director. By all this atrocity propaganda, so that when the ADL calls someone anti-Semitic, the public's listening. They've been programmed to accept it. This is the mode. This is the mechanism of how this works. And when a platform like TikTok defies or maybe is outside of that matrix of control, what do Jewish advocacy groups do? Groups like the North American Jewish Federation, the Republican Jewish Coalition, the American Jewish Committee, the envoy for anti-Semitism in the White House, they create data. They have nonprofits that are funded to the tune of millions by Jewish billionaires that are friends with Israel. And these nonprofits have centers on extremism and hate speech, and they create a cadre of hate speech experts and extremism experts. They generate data and reports, and they fudge the data, but they make data and reports, and they use AIPAC and J Street and the RJC and these advocacy groups to bring these reports in front of Republican congressmen and Democratic congressmen. And they say TikTok is anti-Semitic. We need you to take a look at our data showing this. And if you don't support this bill that we wrote, we're going to call you anti-Semitic. We'll give you the Thomas Massey treatment. We'll give you who were the progressive congressmen that lost their primaries in 2024 in Massachusetts and Missouri, in New York? We'll give you their treatment. They get TikTok banned. This is how they operate. And then when they facilitate the sale of TikTok to American companies, who wanted this to happen? Jeffrey Yass, a Jewish billionaire. Who are they selling it to? Larry Ellison, a Jewish billionaire, a friend of Israel. This is how it works. And there's a lot of friends of Israel. Do you know how many friends of Israel are involved in American politics? And by that, I mean their prime minister. Let's just take a quick survey. The owner of Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post is News Corp. News Corp is owned by Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch brokered American citizenship in America in the 80s through Reagan to help spy on Americans and spread U.S. propaganda with his radio towers. Murdoch is a lifelong friend of Bibi Netanyahu. Murdoch donated to Netanyahu's election campaign. That's who's running Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post. Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, is close personal friends with Netanyahu. Netanyahu stays at his building, 666 Fifth Avenue, when he visits New York City. Jared Kushner brokered the Abraham Accords. Jared Kushner brokered the various omnibus spending bills in 2017 and 2018. He brokered the USMCA trade agreement that replaced NAFTA. His father, Charles Kushner, is our ambassador to France, admonishing Macron for anti-Semitism. Kushner was running the first White House. Kushner's brokering the peace in the Middle East right now. These are two of your friends of Netanyahu. And Larry Ellison, who's buying TikTok. These are just a few off the top of the dome. That is our society. So, it's like I said at the top, and this is obviously related. There's obviously no shortage of things that you can look at an Israeli connection, a Jewish connection. And some things are legitimate and some things are not. This is how it actually works. This is how they actually operate. They actually operate using advocacy groups. They actually operate using the bully pulpit and the press. They operate using Jewish American billionaires that do the bidding of the state of Israel. They take advantage of that. That's a vulnerability. And they look at sectors of elite society to gain market share. They replace the president of Harvard with a Jew. Bill Ackman, a Jewish billionaire alum, leads the charge with Elise Stefanik, with all Jewish donors, to get the progressive black president of Harvard fired and replaced by a Jewish doctor. That's how they do it. They get the Jewish advocacy groups to create data that says TikTok is making the youth anti-Semitic. They transfer ownership of TikTok to a Jewish billionaire and a friend of Israel. Jonathan Greenblatt rallies the advertisers using the bully pulpit, the Jewish media, and the asset managers, also owned by sympathetic Jews, to bring the hammer down on Facebook to ban Holocaust denial, Twitter to ban From the River to the Sea. This is what they do. This is how they do it. Now, Charlie Kirk was never outspoken against any of that. People point to one monologue he made in 2023. Okay. This is the real systematic Jewish influence. You don't want to go to war against Iran? Okay, big deal. Nobody wants to go to war against Iran. You said Epstein was Mossad? Obviously he was. This is the systemic Jewish influence. Not even Zionist, not Israeli, not Netanyahu, not neocons, not Likud. This is the systemic Jewish control matrix over our country. And it is real, and there is evidence, and there are rational arguments for it, and it is basically inarguable that it is happening. And that's the kind of thing that people need to talk about. Don't show me that Charlie Kirk was assassinated in a place that looks like a menorah, because that just sounds crazy. Don't tell me there's blood packs and trap doors and they flew to Tuba City and then to Tel Aviv, because, if there was something there, we would talk about it, but there just isn't. That stuff just makes us sound insane. When you say there's no evidence, but it's the Jews every time, you just sound irrational and prejudiced. But if you can demonstrate how this stuff actually works, if you can name the names, if you can follow the money, if you can talk about the structure, if you can answer the who, what, when, where, why, and how, that's credibility. And that's how you get a bright, intelligent person to realize the nature of our problem. You all realize this cannot stand. Like, obviously, the cybersecurity argument about TikTok was a ruse. That was a calculated deception to do regime change at TikTok, to facilitate the transfer of it so that they could further entrench their control over what we see and how we think. And this is QED, what they did and how they did it. That's the kind of thing that people need to start to work on. We need to level up and get smarter. We need high IQ researchers that can find connections like this. We need high IQ research that can point out Alex Karp at Palantir and what he has said about Christian nationalists, and Peter Thiel and what he said about Israel. We need high IQ researchers that can make the connections. You know, there is a Jewish connection with Turning Point. How about how Sean McGuire, a Jewish venture capitalist, and Bill Ackman, a Jewish Wall Street hedge fund manager. These are two lifelong Democrats that started supporting Republicans after October 7th. They started to pump millions into Turning Point, or were considering pumping millions into Turning Point towards the end of the summer. That's an interesting connection. Bill Ackman put up $1 million for the guy that killed Charlie Kirk. Ben Shapiro gave Turning Point $1 million after Charlie Kirk's passing. Sean McGuire, I think, talked about contributing also. Those are some interesting connections. Those are names. That's following the money. That's following a pattern that's been happening over the years. The conspiratard stuff I'm not interested in. So that is the TikTok sale. And like I said, we'll see the actual details of the deal. It's not a done deal. We have a framework. We have some unconfirmed reports about what might be contained in it, but they've extended the deadline for TikTok to make a deal again. And it so far seems to be elusive. But that is what they're trying to do. And it's very obvious. And it's very clear, and they're not even hiding it, honestly. But that's that. So we're going to move on. We're not going to have time to talk about H-1B visas. We might cover that next week. We're going to move on. We'll take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all this.
It's getting to the point where I'm questioning everything. It has really gotten to the point where I'm questioning everything. And when I say everything, I mean history, narratives. Everything seems to be built on who can control narratives. And when I think about how we'll look back at these times, let's say 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, hopefully we get there. I'm realizing how much of this narrative will be controlled by who is in control of the media, who was censored, who had the power, leverage, and control to make sure that different things were being presented in a way that favors their agenda. And it has me questioning a lot of things that we've been taught in the past. I don't understand this. Like, it's almost as if, you know, people make these jokes about, and I think Netanyahu made some jokes about Israel being blamed for everybody. You know, you trip on something and you blame Israel. It reminds me of what he said before. I think he said this before, or maybe somebody else was saying it, but actually somebody else was saying it, where you accuse other people of doing something while you're doing it to deflect and really have people confused. A lot of the things that Bibi Netanyahu and Israel are pushing as far as other people doing to Israel, that's the exact same thing that Israel's doing to those groups. Whether it's the genocide that I believe that's being committed, or whether it's, you know, people lying and trying to control the narrative, that is exactly what Israel's doing. And to Donald Trump, this may be one of the most disappointing things ever. Like, I can't look at Trump the same. Can y'all look at Trump the same? Especially those that supported Trump. Now, people that didn't support Trump, I get that. You know, you probably hated him before, you'll probably hate him now. But I have to admit that this is a bit surprising. And the reason why I say it's a bit surprising is because at this point it's not, but it's like, damn, every single day it seems like Donald Trump is making a significant move for Israel and not doing anything when it comes to America. And a lot of the things that he's making, these moves that he's making for Israel, America doesn't benefit from. It may even hurt America. Matter of fact, it does hurt America in a lot of ways. It has us more entrenched in the conflicts in the Middle East, supporting Israel and everything that they're doing, which is obviously going to create what we'll call terrorists, right? It's going to create those things because we're destroying people's land. We're being the big bad bully. or we're standing behind Israel so they can leverage America's ability to bully other people. And it's just like we're doing it in Israel's name. It makes me question things across the board. How do you go to such great measures where we talk about China owning TikTok and why TikTok's going to be banned, but then we start to figure out how TikTok can then be bought by somebody who has close relationships with, finances a lot of the efforts of the country that this person is the prime minister in. That prime minister, it's clear that they spy on us in America. Ted Cruz acknowledged that Israel spies on us. And Ted Cruz, obviously, he's willing to do any and everything to please Israel. He thinks it's his gateway to heaven. I don't know, but it's like, how does this make sense? If we're trying to protect the integrity of America, I don't understand how Trump is just allowing himself to become violated and allowing our country to be violated while he walks around like Bibi Netanyahu has him on a leash. I don't know what they have on him. And it seems like we're saying this every single day. But every single day, it's like another move is being made to make us scratch our heads and be like, yo, who's running the country? Who's running the country? Now, somebody who worked for or served in the IDF, now they're going to be the ones that are determining what should be banned, what should be censored. I really don't have a lot of thoughts on it. They're doing it in such a direct way. And when I mean they're doing it in such a direct way, what exactly are they doing? They are controlling and manipulating the US government in such a direct way that it's almost like it's still, even though it's right in front of you, it's almost hard to believe. When we talk about AIPAC, when we talk about these different groups that they were saying, the guy that's getting ready to, Larry Ellison, when I looked up the amount of money that he's contributed to Israel defenses, the fact that he wanted Bibi Netanyahu on his board, he's a billionaire that finances a lot of these things. How do you allow him to control the information of Americans, knowing his strong affiliation to Israel, when once again, you know that they spy on us? This makes me look at the Epstein files again and say, oh yeah, okay, maybe the Epstein files is really showing some connection to Israel. And that's why Donald Trump has completely just, done a 180 on it at the expense of people looking at him, to the point where he's losing a whole lot of credibility from people that were a part of his base. Now, he could sit here and say that he doesn't care. Trump has a huge ego. He cares what people think about him. He cares what people think about him. But when I'm just, they doing it right in front of our face. There's no MAGA. It's really not MAGA. It's really make Israel great again. It's really make Israel great again. And this makes us look at Israel a type of way. It makes us look at Bibi Netanyahu a type of way. Bibi Netanyahu, I should say, and how he behaves makes us look at Israel overall some type of way. We are getting bullied. We're getting bullied. I'm looking at my notes and they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. And when it comes to a lot of these organizations, and it's funny because when we think about Fox News, when we think about the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and they're all owned by News Corp, this is where the real battle is. The real battle's not fought in the battlefield. The real battle is controlling narratives, controlling the minds of Americans. Because if they can control the minds of Americans, then they can ensure that the history that's documented is written with their pen rather than somebody else's pen, rather than the opposition's pen. And this is what I mean when I say it's got me looking at a lot of these historical events differently. Are y'all the same? Just looking at this situation, imagine how this situation with Israel and Palestine is going to be played out and presented to kids in school 100, 200, 300 years from now? Maybe how it's being presented right now to kids in school. Do we think it's an accurate representation of what's really going on? When we think about the fact that censorship, the group of people who was against censorship, now they're for censorship. And the only reason they're for censorship is to make sure that college students don't say free Palestine, to make sure that college students don't criticize Israel. Where does this end? Is this going to get to a point where just common citizens, you just can't criticize Israel? Didn't they make certain things? I was getting ready to say, didn't they make certain laws, put certain laws in place to where if you say certain things about Israel that you can get in trouble? It's almost like, damn, like so you could just talk whatever way about your government. We can talk whatever way about America, but don't you dare say something about Israel. It's like, what is this really about? What is this really about? And this is the behavior that makes us question, like when they behave in such a way where it's like, damn, they got the audacity to do something like this. This is what makes us question Bibi Netanyahu's behavior after Charlie Kirk passed away, when it's like, damn, he's just trying to control another narrative. Here he goes, just trying to control another narrative. And we fall for it. We fall for it. Matter of fact, I don't even know if we really fall for it, but it's just like they're just flexing their muscle in whatever way that maybe people are just scared to acknowledge it. Maybe people are scared to call it out. When you think about the fact that AIPAC, right? You look at the Democrats and Republicans, and AIPAC is one of the only large organizations that donates to both and controls both. And people on both parties have acknowledged that there's a overwhelmingly amount of control, power, influence from AIPAC. And they don't have to register as a foreign lobbying group. It's like, why? Why? When did we vote? Matter of fact, why don't we include that on the next ballot when we're choosing presidents? You know how we vote for the legalized marijuana, to vote for this, we vote for that. Maybe we should vote on whether or not we should treat Israel like it's a partner of America, whether or not we should prioritize Israel's agenda over Americans. How long do we keep having to go down this path? How long do we have to keep going down this path before we realize, like, hold up, let's evaluate this with some honesty and truth here, rather than just continuing to be lied to and act as if, like, it's like we're being lied to and we got to just take it and act like, oh, okay. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. With TikTok, can you imagine how much more leverage Israel would have over our government if they're able to control TikTok, if they're able to take the information, take our habits, control our algorithm? Can you imagine that? Think about what Nick mentioned earlier as far as a lot of the other platforms being more pro-Israel and TikTok being more pro-Palestine. Imagine what that's going to do. That's going to close off an entire perspective. And everybody's not going to go and do their due diligence and go out of their way to look up stuff. This is definitely a setback. It's definitely a setback. It's disappointing, to say the least. But at the end of the day, it goes back to what we always talk about, which is follow the money. Follow the money. Forget the security of American intelligence. Forget any of that. And it's almost like, when we look at it, it's like, okay, so China can't have our information, but Israel can. Who decided for Americans that Israel, who spies on us, gets the ability to have access to this information? Like, who decided that that was a smart thing to do? And then we're going to allow them to monitor it as well. I don't know where this is going to go. And honestly, it's a bit scary, because when we think about the United States of America backing up Israel without question, and when I mean without question, I mean, think about America. If we choose to just get behind 100% behind anything that Israel does, can we imagine the type of danger that we're going to put ourselves in? Can we really imagine the type of death and destruction that we're going to visit upon the world? We already killed 500,000 children because Bibi Netanyahu said that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Meanwhile, no Israeli soldiers were sent to the war. I believe we had well over, into the few hundred thousands of American troops dying. And the whole reason why we went there, what did we find out? There's no weapons of mass destruction. Thanks, Bibi. Now we just take his word. Like, do we understand how dangerous this is? And what makes it even worse is he does it all in the name of religion. He does it all in the name of religion. Every time we see him on TV, I'm the prime minister of the only Jewish state. You lead with that. No matter what death and destruction and chaos you cause in that region, you always lead with that. I don't understand. I don't understand how we allow this. I don't understand how we tolerate this. I don't understand why we're okay with sending our money to support these things that Israel is doing and backing them without questioning anything that they do. I don't understand it. But I guess it just is what it is. I mean, how do y'all feel about it? I'm not going to talk your heads off for too long, but this is just the frustration things that come to mind when I'm hearing Nick talk about TikTok and looking at it from a big picture standpoint. I don't get it. I do get it, but I just don't understand why we tolerate it. And it plays into the, like, Jewish people overall in Israel and Bibi Netanyahu are very sensitive about how people see them, their perspective, the perspective that they have, the perspective that other people have on the Jewish population. Very sensitive. And I believe that a lot of this is because of the Holocaust, right? But the actions, the things that you're doing, the moves that you're making, how do you expect people to look at you? And the reason why I said Jewish and I'm connecting Jewish with it, because let's be honest, every time Bibi Netanyahu jumps up on TV, he says, I'm the prime minister of the only Jewish state. So do Jewish people call him out for, like, hey, don't say that? I don't get it. In my opinion, he's putting his own people in harm's way. When you do these type of things, when you put out a certain amount of evil energy, do we not think that ends up coming back our way eventually? I don't know. As always, appreciate y'all for tapping in. Like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know where I'm wrong, and let me know how I may be seeing this maybe a little bit, too focused, and maybe need to broaden the lens. But I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I see what's happening, and I still continue, maybe naively, to be surprised. It's crazy. It's like, damn, like every bold move that's done, I'm like, damn, they got the audacity, and then it's just taking a step further. So appreciate y'all tapping in. We're going to keep these conversations going. We're going to keep these conversations going because I think that they're necessary, because I think there's a lot more people than we may even acknowledge questioning a lot of these things. And we have to question these things, because if we don't, then they may continue to happen regardless of whether we question them. But at the very least, we got to question them, because imagine if they just got the free will to just do whatever, assuming that they have our support, no matter what they do. So y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day, evening, depending on when you watch this, and I'll see you on the next one. It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.